and welcome to News.tv. My name is Spencer Burke, your host for ThinkFWD. I'm joined together today with Pete Rollins. He's the author of How Not to Speak of God and The Orthodox Heretic. Now, Pete, the deal is with these kinds of titles, it sounds like they're contradictory.
Well, yeah, I guess my interest in using these things like orthodox and heresy, speaking of God and not speaking of God, is working with the idea that the truth is not at one extreme or the other. Neither is the truth somewhere in the middle, but the truth is at both extremes. Mm-hmm. If you take an example of an idea that I'm playing with at the moment, you've got traditional Christians who say that, God is present, God exists, and Christianity is true. And then you have these people, the new atheists, Dawkins, Harris, Dennett, who are saying that God isn't there and that Christianity isn't true. And then, of course, you have Christ on the cross who doubts God when he shouts out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Which brings us through to a third position, which is the very moment that you think God isn't there, that you feel utterly forsaken by God, is the very moment that you're in the space of God, that you dwell in the very place of Christ. So I'm very interested in exploring how we can get to a third position beyond, say, merely God exists, God doesn't exist, to a place where we say, well, God exists, but every time we speak of God, we speak of less than God, and we miss God. For me, Christ is not so much the founder of a new religion as someone who existed between religions, between Old Testament and New Testament, between Judaism and Christianity. So in a sense, instead of thinking about Jesus coming in and critiquing one religion and instituting something else, Jesus and the early disciples existed in this space between, a liminal space. One could say that Christians are called not to dwell on one side of history or the other side of history, but rather to dwell in the very split which Christ opens up when he splits history into two.
Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes people think that knowing is enough, but there's a doing as well. I mean, we talked a little bit about some of the illustrations you had, and it was fascinating to think of some characters in history that may have said the right things and maybe even done a few of the right things, but overall missed the point completely.
Yeah, you have this idea that, especially in the circles that I hang around in, that we can disagree theologically and philosophically about things, but at the end of the day, we're all friends, and we can go to the pub and have a drink, and there's something more than our public profile. We've got this private self. I found an article about Hitler written by a magazine called Homes and Country. It's kind of like a celebrity magazine, written in 1938 in America. And it was showing you around Hitler's home. And it was telling you how Hitler loved to give cupcakes to children, how he loved to entertain guests, was a strict vegetarian, had a beautiful garden with lots of herbs and vegetables, how he never touched a drop of alcohol. And he had his paintings up on the wall. And it was... What I was fascinated by was the idea that we say, oh yeah, an enemy is someone whose story we haven't heard. As if whenever I get to know somebody and I hear their story, I'll get to like them and know that they're just like me. But the issue for me is that actually the story we tell ourselves is a type of lie, a fiction. The truth of who we are and the truth of who Hitler wasn't in the fact that he liked to give cupcakes to children. The truth of who he was in what he did during the Second World War, what he did to the Jewish community. And I don't want to get to know him. He says lots of nice things about what he believes and what he thinks, but his truth is in who he is. You might be a nice person, but if you're racist, if you're misogynistic, if you've got views that are damaging and destroying people's lives, that's your truth. That's your truth. So if someone says, I believe in the resurrection of Christ, I believe in the virgin birth, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, we may be able to agree over a drink and talk about all of that stuff. But if it's not lived, if that person is not thinking about where they're living, what job they're doing, how their consumerism affects and influences other people, then I don't care what you believe. Your belief is an abstract thing. It's nothing. It's not to do with real life. Facebook is a great example. I mean, what is Facebook? Facebook is the idealized representation of ourselves, the type of person that we want the world to see. I mean, if we imagine aliens coming down to Earth and looking at humanity through Facebook, they think we're all happy all the time and we're all very nice. I mean, I was in the art gallery last week and there was a girl getting her picture taken looking at a piece of art. Now, it was obvious she wasn't interested in the piece of art, but she was really interested in getting a picture of herself looking at the piece of art that she could then put on Facebook. The point I'm making is that my conscious self is an idealized reflection of who I really am. If the people who are watching this knew everything there was to know about me, they would switch off, you know? And vice versa, if I knew everything there was to know about the people who are watching this, I wouldn't bother myself doing it, you know? So the point is that the narratives, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, don't necessarily reflect who we really are. For me, one of the rules of doing counselling or spiritual direction is to take the false narrative we talk about, we tell ourselves we are. I'm a good person, I'm a nice person, I care for people, I'm loving. And actually bring that in line with our reality. A reality that sometimes we're too scared to look at.
Now, I've been following you on Twitter and Facebook, and so the idea of resurrection, but insurrection.
Yes.
Play with this a little bit. This is fascinating.
Yeah, well, I'm doing a pub tour over Easter, and Easter's all about resurrection. And we were sitting wondering, what should we name it? And somebody said, well, what about the tagline, I believe in the insurrection? And I love that, because for me, Christianity is the belief in resurrection is about participation in an insurrection, in something that transforms society, that brings the not yet into the now. You see, whenever I say I believe in God, philosophically I might say, someone says, do you believe in God? And I say, well, that's a great question. Yeah, I think I do, or I'm not sure. But let's talk about it over a coffee. But if someone says, as a Christian, do you believe in God? My answer has to be no. Or I aspire to believe in God. Because in Christianity, belief in God means living a life of love. Living a life of mercy and forgiveness, faithfulness, justice, self-control, patience, kindness. And so do I believe in God? Most of the time I don't believe in God. I want to. Because the crazy thing is, what I'm saying is, if you say you know God and don't love, you're a liar. Now that's heresy. That's crazy. You get kicked out of most churches for saying stuff like that. But I've got a good source for that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not me who said that. And I want to kind of really explore how whenever you believe in resurrection, it doesn't matter, it's a fiction. It's a fiction if it's just what you do so as you feel that you're going to go to heaven when you die and life is good and everything's going to work out well for you and your family. It's a fiction. It's a lie. But if you're the site where resurrection takes place, if you're the site where life happens and where life emanates, then you do believe in the resurrection, absolutely and fundamentally.
So we could be on the lookout for, whoever's doing the next megachurch and all that. But it sounds like you're on the lookout for the few.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this tour I'm doing, I could have done it in large churches. I could have got paid to do it in those kinds of contexts. But I want to do it in small pubs. I want to find the people who are the next generation, those edgy people on the edge or just who have fallen off the edge, who are willing to take seriously the idea that what we believe emanates from who we are. It's not about kind of affirming a set of dogma. And in fact, it's not even about kind of engaging in a certain moral behaviour. It's about dying to yourself and being reborn. You see, here's the interesting thing. I'm so not a liberal because I'm with Paul. Paul's the first person to write this stuff down, right? He's the first person to write Christianity. And what does he do? Does he talk about what Jesus says? No. Does he talk about what Jesus does? No. He has virtually no interest in who Jesus hangs out with, virtually no interest in what Jesus says. What's he interested in? Oh, by the way, why is he not? Because what Jesus said, good as it is, other people were saying similar things. Ask any rabbi, they'll say, well, Jesus was a good interpreter of the Torah. Was he the first person to say, turn the other cheek? No. Those miracles, great as they were attributed also to other people before and after Jesus. So if you're a good liberal, you'll follow the teachings of Jesus, and that's great. But if you want to be, what's Christianity at its heart? It's about, and this is Pauline insight, participating in the death and resurrection of Christ, that you die and you're reborn, you're transformed, you're no longer the same. And in the Insurrection tour is about saying, all of the other stuff's good, belief and following the ways of Jesus, that's all fine, but you know what? We're invited into transformation, death and rebirth, where we become instruments of transformation in the world. We believe in God when we become the site where God is born, where we become like Mary.
I'm looking forward to joining the Insurrection, eh?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Glenn.